on a detailed question, I guess, do we have a timeline for an update for Dr. Williams' report at this point?
Yes.
Realizing
We actually were expecting the report today, October 15th.
Okay.
So we'll follow up with them tomorrow.
Sorry, didn't mean to cause trouble.
No, it's okay.
And I guess I would agree that the other question is sort of, in all of these, trying to set a stretch goal that is ambitious but achievable. But, you know, it's sort of how do you strike that balance? And I'm not sure that I have an answer to that for any of these, but I guess I'll back up what Mr. Casilla had to say on that one. I think that's kind of an important thing that we should be striving for throughout, So assessing, I think my biggest thing is how would we assess the progress on each one of these topics. So.
Great feedback from all of you. I will say that was the internal conversation too, and I think the process junkie in me came out. So let us go back and take another look. Good points.
Oh, yeah.
And I just have to ask, for Mr. Kane's collaborating with the students developing and implementing surveys, is he going to have a survey about whether the calzone should be open-faced or closed?
I don't know. I'll ask him though.
Well, thank you very much. I've especially heard anecdotal, some anecdotes this week from community members that maybe in our high school there are some students who don't feel as welcome. And so I think it's great that we really are focusing on developing a climate where every child feels, people don't feel marginalized. And that's information I'm waiting to see if I can pass out to the board. But I don't know how you measure it, but I think that focusing on climate and culture is really important. And maybe even if we don't have a exact measurement of success on that, working toward it is still important. So thank you. Next up is 6.03, our legislative and advocacy priorities, and I will turn that over to Ms. Litton.
Thank you very much, and thanks for giving me a few minutes to talk through this and just get some feedback from you guys as we work to put this together. First of all, I realized on the legislative package from last year, I think when you open it in Google Docs, you guys are maybe not getting the comments. Can you see the comments of what happened with each one or not?
I can see a little, but it doesn't click.
Oh, it doesn't.
A little yellow blurb over the letters.
Okay. You know what? I can just talk through them. I have it here somewhere. Sorry about that. I did it in Word, and I think when you open it in Google Docs, you know what? I can just walk through it and give people an update on each of these. So just going through the agenda, our positions from last year. I mean, a number of these issues were actually addressed in the legislature. So, first of all, obviously, the first one on the school calendar. We spent a good amount of time on that this evening, so you all know that one was addressed. The second one on the standards of quality, flexible funding for mental health professionals, that was not addressed as far as I understand it. They are doing a significant revision on standards of quality right now, and I know Dr. Noonan, I believe you got an update on that at your VAS meeting. And I don't know if folks had a chance to look at the other document I sent that kind of outlines some of those changes. I don't think it specifically addresses this issue from what I understand. Would you agree? Yeah. So this, I think this one will likely remain on our agenda if people don't object to that. I know it's also been added to the VSBA's agenda as a new item this year. So I think it was Fairfax County that raised it with VSBA, so it's on their agenda also. And Dr. Noonan, do you feel like that's still an issue we are interested in? I'm assuming it
Yeah,
is.
I can't say what you're interested in or not, but I would say it would be really good if we could keep it on the agenda for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things happening. One is there is going to be some changes to the SOQ, and then there's going to be re-benchmarking, which is an every 2-year process where they look at how much money is required to fund the SOQ. And I'll remind the board that the standards of quality in Virginia have never been fully funded. So any changes that happen, it's really important that we keep our eye on how that gets funded going forward. So if there is a change, for example, in ratios for school counselors, for example, and it drops to 250 to 1, that puts the down pressure on us to get to those ratios within the SOQ, and maybe we get the funding from the state through re-benchmarking and maybe not. So the hope is that the money would flow behind the change. So keeping it on the agenda is good.
Okay. And next item, as you guys know, was the issue that was kind of specific to us that Marcus Simon introduced a bill on, and it was passed. So we can take that off this year. We're excited that that made its way through. Let's see, the DACA issue, there was a bill last year introduced, and it was passed out of committee, but it was defeated on the Senate floor. So that is still a pending issue. Is that something everybody would like to leave on our agenda, I'm assuming? Okay. Let's see. The next one was on articulation agreements. There was one piece of legislation that kind of addressed this, but primarily addressed the career and technical education portion of it. So I don't think it's really been addressed in a significant way. So we may want to continue to keep it on the agenda if folks feel that's appropriate. Then the next one had to do with teachers passing the praxis assessment. And that one was, for the most part, addressed in Senate Bill 2037, at least a portion of it. So that may be one we do not need to keep on the agenda. Dr. Noonan, I don't know if you...
I don't know enough about that one.
Okay, I believe there was language that pretty closely matched that in 2037, and it was kind of a workaround. I think it came from the superintendent's agenda last year that it was a workaround. If a teacher hadn't passed praxis, there were some other ways that a district could waive them in to keep them on for a certain amount of time. So I will double check to make sure that that was addressed.
Just a quick question on that one. Yeah, I think that's a bigger overall issue that we need to just double check to make sure that that praxis piece is there, because I think more and more jurisdictions are looking at ways to find workarounds with praxis because of teacher shortages. So I just want to make sure that if there's something that that if it's not addressed already, but something we potentially may want to look at ways to give some flexibility on workarounds.
Some flexibility. Okay, well, I will double check on that one to find out exactly how closely the change matched what we'd put in here. And if it means, I believe it meant that a district could then bring somebody on permanently, but let me double check and make sure it wasn't a temporary until they pass it. But I believe that was included in the Senate bill. So under funding, our first one had to do with teacher salaries. As you guys all know, there was a 5% increase in the budget last year. But this seems to me like something we would like to keep on our agenda. I'm not sure 5%. I don't think any teachers feel like that really made the difference they would need. Do you guys agree that it's something we want to continue to talk about?
So I just have a question in terms of, I think everybody wants teachers to earn more. The question is how to pay for it.
Right.
And I guess the question is, we are above this as a division, right? So I guess the question, is this a sort of state policy thing that we're advocating because we think salary should be higher, even though it doesn't really affect us, which I think is a fine thing to do, but I guess I'm just wanting us to understand what it is we're trying to do, and, you know, for school divisions that may have difficulty funding the status quo, are we looking for Richmond to provide the money for this? And, you know, for example, with respect to the 5% raise, that really didn't flow down. I mean, if you parse that, it wasn't
Right.
just, here's 5%,
Pretty-
everybody.
Exactly.
So I guess just focusing on what it is we're trying to do, I think increasing teacher pay is super important, but what does that mean, and how do you help districts that aren't as fortunate as we are accomplish that?
Right, and, I mean, I don't know if anybody has any suggestions, whether it's, we want to write it in a way that specifically would somehow help us, or, I mean, I guess my feeling would be, we just want to be generally advocating throughout the state, for the state to make an investment in helping to raise teacher pay. But I'd love to hear from everybody else what
I think that's great, yeah.
what their feelings are on that. Yeah.
I would think it would be for, again, we are in a position that we're already there, but I think it's more of potentially working with other jurisdictions in other parts of the state more to push Richmond towards coming to the table more with some of those dollars to help those other jurisdictions to bring their salaries up. But yeah, because it doesn't have a significant impact on us, as well as probably most Northern Virginia jurisdictions.
I just want to, two things. One is I want to let you all know or remind you that next week I'll be going to the VAST conference in Charlottesville, where we're going to have some presentations of some of this legislation, and some legislators will be there, so I'll be able to provide a little bit more information. And the other kind of goes to this particular question. I think one of the things that would be important perhaps in your advocacy is that if there is 5%, that we get the full 5%. Because if it flows through the formula, you know, the LCI and our local composite index, and we only get 20% of the 5%, that puts us locally on the hook for the other 80%, and then locks us into doing 5%. So it does have some impact on us locally, and potentially in ways that could have longer-term impacts.
And building on that point, I mean, I agree, getting aligned with other divisions in Virginia to try to raise all boats, but raising all boats. And for us, I think this last phrase here, including cost of competing adjustment, is kind of really important for us, to make sure that we're pushing not just for the idea that, yeah, we need to raise teacher salaries, but we also need to be able to do that, you know,
Right.
across the board in Northern Virginia, so.
Okay, but I mean, I'll just put it out there, with the resources that we have, as a Commonwealth, is this, if there are so many divisions that are below average, is that really realistic to say, hey, we want 5% too? I would say probably not. You know, maybe it's a question of, are we talking about, would we have to raise our teacher salaries 5% as well? That's different from closing the gap on the ones that are below the average. So maybe we want to parse that a little, I don't know.
I think one way you could say it in your legislative package, and we can kind of work on some of the details too, we'd be happy to support you, would be that we would support the 5% unless we've already met that 5%. Then, and I think ultimately what we're after at VAS is to not just meet the